Hi everyone, Anders Ibsen from Windermere Professional Partners, managing broker for Anders Ibsen Homes. I'm here with my good friends and colleagues, Michael Wickland from Sterling Inspection Group and Dwayne Boggs from Boggs Inspection Service. Welcome, gentlemen. And we're here to talk, of course, about inspections and in particular how they pertain to homes here in our neighborhood in the North End. But before we go into that subject matter, let's hear a little bit more from our guests. Starting with Dwayne, tell me more about Boggs Inspection Service and how much business you've done in the area.
Okay. We were founded in 2004. We've done roughly about 14,000 inspections over the years. I've got a team of 5 inspectors and an inspector manager. Really a family-based company. I've got my wife and my daughter working with us, and we just treat the whole team as a family. So it's a great family unit.
Awesome. What about you, Michael?
Well, this is my anniversary month of March. I started 23 years ago. I have 7 inspectors plus myself. We have a staff of 16. I'm an instructor. I teach nationally, so I flew out of CTEC 9 times last year to go teach sewer scope, advanced sewer scope training.
Didn't you inspect Shaq's house?
I did inspect Shaquille O'Neal's house, yeah. I also inspected, the lead singer for Nirvana.
Kurt Cobain?
Kurt Cobain's house, the one he died in, yeah.
Oh, okay. I'm sorry.
So I've personally done just a little over 12,000 inspections. Our company's done a little over 25,000 inspections. And was a carpenter all my life for about 17 years before home inspecting. And so about 39 years total working on houses, either remodeling or inspecting. So,
anyway. Very reliable group of people. I send all my buyers to these 2 companies. So let's talk a little bit more about the subject matter. In your experience looking at the city of Tacoma and neighborhoods like the North End, what are the most common issues that you usually tend to see when you inspect homes? And we'll start with you, Michael.
Well, I think nationally, the number one callback for inspectors or to an agent would be leaks, whether that's a plumbing leak or a roof leak. So that's the number one thing that buyers, after they move in, find leaks. So that's the number one callback. But with older homes, it's always going to be plumbing or electrical. I always feel like electrical is a little more important because it's a health safety issue. One of 2 things are going to happen if you have an electrical problem. We're either going to have a fire or someone's going to get shocked or electrocuted. If you have a plumbing leak, I don't think anybody drowns because of a plumbing leak. You can get a lot of structural damage, but nobody actually gets physically injured. So there's a lot to look at on an older home, and we do a lot of turn-of-the-century homes.
Sure. Dwayne?
Kind of adding to that, I would say, first off, once again, thank you for having us here. I just recently became a member of, not a member, but the vice president of Ashley Western Society, Home Inspectors here. And me and Michael are really into education, so I think it's a great team to have us here. I would say as far as the Tacoma area, we see a lot of Orangeburg when we do the sewer scopes.
Oh, those are brutal.
Yeah, that's starting to collapse. If nothing lasts forever, it's kind of surprising that product even lasts as long as it has.
Dwayne, for people's benefit, because that's I've seen them everywhere in Fircrest, but if you see them in Tacoma, then I'm truly sorry. Tell our audience the horror story that is Orangeburg side sewers.
Orangeburg was made out of tar and paper, and over the years it's just collapsed. It's a sewer line that was used back in the 30s, 40s, or older, and it just over time just starts to collapse, corrosions, and collapses very easily with the time, and it's expensive to replace. You can't put a liner in there. You pretty much have to replace the whole line or huge sections of it, and it can just be very problematic, but definitely you want to let your buyers know about it.
Absolutely. And I'm glad you mentioned buyers, because let's just say that you're talking to a typical home buyer looking in the area, inexperienced, no technical knowledge or construction experience. If you were to tell them about maybe the top 2 or 3 red flags that they should look for when evaluating a house, what do you think those would be, especially if it was here in the North End? Michael?
Well, I would say, the biggest thing that covers their whole investment would be the roof. Mm-hmm. Roofs can be very costly, maybe second to underground sewer lines, as we've talked about. Orangeburg or cast iron, concrete or clay, they all, as I always say, houses are like people. With age, everything sags, wrinkles, and turns gray. So,
yeah.
Even us.
Except people like water and houses really don't. That's the big difference.
So roof is really kind of a big deal in the Northwest because we just see so much water.
So what does a failing roof look like?
Lots of granule loss where you're starting to see the membrane, or even if we go past the membrane, we're starting to see the fiberglass hairs. You can have a bald tire and maybe drive to 7-Eleven, but you don't wanna drive to New York. And I always use kind of car tires as an example. If you have tread on the tire, you're probably okay. If you have granules on the shingles, you're probably okay. But when you have no granules, it's like no tread on the tire. You may have a bald tire and it's still holding air. It's still a bald tire. The granules are gone. It's a failing or failed roof.
Michael, or excuse me, Dwayne. Sorry.
Yeah, I would say also it's very easy, especially for agents, to look at the electrical. Look at the Zinco panels, the Federal Pacific. Those are all, when I teach classes and stuff, I talk to the buyer's agents and say, you know, take the anxiety down. When you're walking them through the house, say, hey, this is something the home inspector is going to probably bring up. And roofing, you can see pretty much from the sidewalk, electrical panels, older furnaces, things like that. But the Zinco, the Federal Pacific is something definitely the buyer should be concerned with.
And those were both recalled in 2002, right? Both of those panels, Zinsco and Federal Pacific?
Not officially.
Not officially.
Now, everybody asked that, but not surprisingly, no, they're never recalled.
Well, the class action lawsuit was in 2002, I think, right?
Well, the CPSC,
Yeah.
the Consumer Product Safety Commission, evaluated Federal Pacific, but in the middle of them looking at Federal Pacific, there was a budget cut, and whenever the president or somebody with the powers that be, when there's a budget cut, everything's just sort of put in a file, and they just never looked at again. So
Take-
they
take
never
some dust.
they never actually completed the evaluation of that company. However, there's enough information out there that by the time they got partway through it, they knew that it was problematic.
So what is it exactly about a Federal Pacific panel or Zinsco panel that makes them so dangerous?
Okay, I'll dive into that in a second, but kind of add to what Michael was saying. There is whole subdivisions in the Dallas-Fort Worth area that are mandating the Zincos be switched out because of the fire hazard, the
Yeah.
safety hazard. The biggest thing with the Zinco, when they get a surge and the power should trip the breaker, it's not. So the connection in the back, it becomes faulty. It's not connected solid.
And it's full of aluminum wiring too, right?
Yeah, well, depending, yeah,
Yeah.
could be aluminum wiring, but the biggest thing is when the breaker should do its job, it's not. So the current continues on.
And then it
that's
arcs
the
and then
biggest safety
overheats
issue.
and you have a fire.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they're not tripping under an imposed load, and the main job of the breaker is to trip when it has too much of an imposed load. And as far as Federal Pacific stab lock, hence the name stab lock, it actually stabs, like two little fingers that stab into a hole, and there's a spring that keeps them separated. Well, the spring gets weak, and then when they stab in, they're not expanding as they should, so we get this micro arcing. And so they're not making good contact. We have lack of conductivity, and hence they end up
Burning your house down.
burning your house down.
Right.
And I would say too, like when me and Michael got started years ago, I would say it's like a 50-50 chance an electrician would say it needs to be switched out. Now it's like 99%. They know it needs to be switched.
And the cost of replacing a panel, I mean, all costs are relative, right? But in the grand scheme of big structural changes to your house, like a new roof is upwards of $20K or $30, depending on how tall it is or how big the footprint is. But in terms of structural repairs, a new panel isn't that bad. It's like $3,000 to $5,000 right now, right?
If that. Yeah.
Yeah, so hire an electrician, make sure licensed, bonded, insured, competent work, and save yourself from a house fire. So let's turn more to the selling side, or not even necessarily sellers, but let's say we're talking about homeowners who live in our part of town who are just looking at the highest return preventative maintenance tips. So people who might have an old house and they're looking for practical tips on making sure their old house maintenance issues don't become old house problems. What are the highest return preventative maintenance behaviors that they can best engage in to maintain the marketability of their house? Michael?
Well, I guess it would all depend on their budget, but when they start getting 100 years old, and if you haven't, rewired or replumbed, those are the things that people look at. They're going to look at how old is the roof, has it been rewired? I mean, because let's face it, we talked about breaker panels. They have a life expectancy. They don't last forever. So rewiring a house that's 100 years old is probably, you're never going to lose money on that. And then replumbing, because galvanized iron pipe is just not going to last forever. Every day it gets a day older, and so, if you're going to even just to keep the house, a lot of times people they repair things right. When do we paint the car? Right before we sell it. Why don't we paint the car and enjoy the paint job? So why don't we maintain the house and enjoy that maintenance? We usually end up waiting, and then we're forced to maintain or repair right before we sell it. It would just be nice if we could enjoy some of that fruits of our labor.
Sure. Dwayne, what do you think?
Yeah, kind of adding what Michael was saying, I would definitely say the simple things, caulking, painting the exterior, cleaning the roof, cleaning the gutters. One of my best stories is I pull up to a house, the guy's selling the house, he's washing wax in his shiny car, and his gutters are half hanging off, they're full of debris, moss on the roof. Those kind of things is going to turn on or turn off a buyer when he walks up to the structure.
And
Oh, I would agree with that, to interrupt, but I would totally agree with that. People will spend more money on a $20, $30, $40, $50,000 car than they will $500,000, you know, the biggest investment of their life.
Yeah.
They don't take care of it, but their car, why?
And the car actually, the car depreciates.
That's
rather
right,
than your house.
appreciating asset,
Right.
appreciating asset, it's what we're seeing in. So it's like, where's our values?
And whenever I'm advising sellers on value adds, depending on the state of the roof, roofs are really special in that sense, speaking as both an appraiser, as an agent, because more experienced buyers are looking at structural things because they've owned a home and they know how pricey things are, and you know, brand new side sewer or replumbed is a big selling point for someone who's actually owned property before. But I'd say a roof is a really good rate of return, really good return for buyers who are evaluating your house, because it's both structural and it's curb appeal. So it's the first thing people see when they're walking into the house, and it's also a long-term feature of the property that more experienced buyers are definitely going to consider when they're factoring in what the holding costs are going to be for that property. Something else I would definitely venture, just to look at preventative stuff, is just water and drainage in general. I mean, if you look at foundations, right? I mean, isn't the number one cause of long-term foundation problems just bad drainage and the water accumulating next to the foundation walls and not being diverted out to the street?
Yeah, correct the downspouts, put the splash blocks in, clean the gutters so it's not coming over the top. All that is very simple remedies, but should be addressed.
You have to have positive grade, not adverse grade. Everything should grade away from the house, not towards the house.
Absolutely. So in talking about, back to buyers, let's talk a little bit more about strategy, because it's a hot market, and unfortunately buyers are just waiving every contingency under the sun when they get desperate, and usually the inspection contingency is the first casualty of that, which has all sorts of risks and consequences, but all the more so when you're talking about old homes, because even an updated old home is going to have old house surprises because it was built prior to modern building code, modern construction practices, modern materials. And I have a 1905 Craftsman, and I'm still working on stuff, you know, and it was updated nicely. I love my house, but it's a 1905 Craftsman. So what more savvy buyers do, and what we always advise our buyers to do whenever possible, if they're in a bidding war type situation, when their competition is unfortunately being reckless and just, I don't care, I want the house, waiving their inspection, is a pre-inspection where we get written permission from the seller to have one of these people look at the house, and while they can't use the inspection to ask for things or negotiate necessarily, they're at least walking in informed. And they have the edge competitively, because from a seller's perspective, a pre-inspection is great. I would actually say a pre-inspection is superior to a waived offer. Whenever I review offers for my sellers, if you had two completely equal offers, except one buyer had waived their inspection and one had pre-inspected offer all day long, because that's a buyer who's not going to get cold feet because they've seen the entirety of the house, warts and all, and they're still writing a competitive offer. That's something that's going to be a stronger close.
One other thing, I think, from a legal standpoint, and this is official, I'm not a lawyer.
Right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Michael.
If you accept an offer that has a pre-inspection, your chances of post-closing litigation are less. Way down compared to the person that waived.
Because they've done their due diligence and they can't allege they were coerced or anything like that.
Even though it's a buyer beware, still it does deter.
Pre-inspections absolutely help both parties. Ideally, you know, as a buyer, you want to have one after you go under contract, because you can get the seller to do things for you. But in the absence of that, if it's competitive, then there are ways to do your due diligence. In both of your experience, what have you seen that really works strategically when buyers do have a pre-inspection? What have you seen that works to help them get under contract while doing that, Dwayne?
I think a lot of it would come down to the agent educating them on what they should ask for, go for the big ticket items, or those are the things you're going to be concerned about. Definitely want to address the roof, the electrical, the structural issues, but put it in perspective. You're buying a house with a story. You're buying a 1920s, 1930s house that's been around for years, and it's just great. It tells a story. I like the older houses a lot better than the newer houses, but put it in perspective, look at the bigger issues, and those are what you want to look at, you want to address.
Absolutely. Michael, any tips on pre-inspecting for buyers?
Yeah, I mean, it's a really tough market, and a lot of listing agents, You know, not, and I wouldn't just blame the listing agent, sometimes it's driven by the seller telling the listing agent what they want. Sometimes those showing times are really short. They go, yeah, we want a full inspection, and we're only gonna give you an hour.
Yeah.
Can't do it, can't do a full inspection in an hour. We had one this week where they tried to get 2 hours, and not to, you know, not to make a short story long, but, so they went back to them and asked, we really need 2 hours. Well, we're not giving you 2 hours, we're only giving you 1 hour. So I'm always kinda like creative, and we have 8 inspectors, so I said, okay, we're gonna put 3 guys on one house, and we're gonna get a 2-hour inspection done in 1 hour. So that's what we do. We also offer another product, and I never liked the name Walk and Talk. You know, I don't know who developed that. I don't know if it was an inspector or an agent or a combination of both. I never liked that term Walk and Talk, because we don't really walk with the client and talk, because if we did, and we only have an hour, we can't get, you're not gonna get as much bang for your buck. Like, don't walk with me, because it's gonna slow me down. It's not that I don't wanna talk to the client, I love clients, but I'm not gonna get as much done if you walk with me. We do that hour inspection, but we don't call it Walk and Talk. We've kind of trademarked a name, Just the Big Stuff. Because people ask me, what are you gonna do in an hour? I said, well, just the big stuff. So then we trademarked that name, Just the Big Stuff Inspection. And what do we do for Just the Big Stuff Inspection? It's an hour, because they're only giving us an hour for showing time.
Yeah.
There's no written report, just like the Walk and Talk. And at the end of it, we'll do a picture review. So we'll go over the pictures with everybody of what we did. We send them that copy of a Google Drive folder of the photos. So if husband's there and the wife's not, or vice versa, they're gonna get the pictures. And we also do an audio recording of us interacting. So we're gonna send them a file with the photos and the audio recording. That way if hubby or wife wasn't there, or partner or whatever, that way they're gonna get it. So that's our Just the Big Stuff inspection. Shameless plug there.
Fair enough. The more shameless, the better.
And we kind of call ours consultation, because it's really what inspectors are. We're the consultants for the buyer or the seller at that point. So we consult with them an hour or two, in and out as fast as we can. And I've done the same thing with my team of inspectors. I had a client one time, they gave us 3 hours for the inspection. The next thing you know, we got an hour and a half. So I sent a couple of inspectors out there. So that's the thing about working with good established companies. We have a team and we can do that. But you've got to switch and pivot. That's the name of the game right now.
And inspect sewers as well. In case
Yes.
that wasn't abundantly clear, always look at the sewer.
Let's go a little further on the sewers.
Okay.
Countless times, just because I'm a national instructor on sewer scoping, I get agents who call, or sometimes buyers, they go, oh, we don't need a sewer inspection, we don't have a sewer, we're on septic. Okay, let me explain something to you. The septic tank that's in the yard, they call it a septic tank, but it's really called on-site sewage. It's on-site sewage versus off-site sewage. And a sewer line is called a sewer line, not because it's going to the city sewer, because what's inside the pipe is called sewage or waste. Plumbers only do 2 things. They do water and waste. They don't even do gas. I mean, if you're in a big city, you wouldn't cross that labor line, because the people that do gas, those are the pipe fitters union, and you wouldn't want to cross those
No.
union lines. So they do water and waste, and we do sewer scopes on the line between the house and the tank. They go, oh, we just had it inspected. Great, you had the pump truck driver inspect the tank and give you an O&M report, an operations and maintenance report. That's great. He sucked out all the doo-doo. He rinsed the walls, because they're covered with you know what. He rinsed the walls to be able to see if there's any cracks in the walls or the bottom. And he gives you an O&M report. And that might be, green lights all the way, thumbs up. But he doesn't look at the line between the house and the tank. And I can't even tell you how many times we've scoped between the house and the tank, right where the pipe meets the tank, grease plugs, roots, breaks, disconnections. I had one where the pipes came together, and it's a misalignment, or what they call an offset, and the pipe had broken off of the tank and dropped at least an inch. So it was catching. It's like riding your bike off the curb or riding your bike up the curb. You're gonna bend your rim. So
Except the bike is really smelly.
That's right.
And unsanitary.
And a lot of people think when they get the septic pumped and report, they look at the line. They don't.
They do not.
And I tell people, a septic line and a sewer line is a line.
It's the same thing.
Exactly.
It's a
line.
it's a side sewer.
Yeah, so
That's right.
people get misinformed, boy, I got a septic report. Well, if they didn't look at this line, and that line feeds everything, so you gotta make sure it's in good condition. So I totally agree with that.
I mean, how much does a side sewer cost to completely replace? Anywhere from what, $10,000 to 20,000 depending.
Or more.
How much
yeah.
does a sewer scope inspection cost? Like 100 to 200, right? So
Yeah,
just-
between 2 to 3, I would say.
yeah, just compare those two numbers, and it's pretty obvious.
And if you're buying a multiplex,
Yeah.
let's just talk about that.
Okay.
If we have a multiplex, a duplex, a fourplex, a sixplex, a tenplex, there's more
Grease.
There's more people pooping.
And they dump their grease
Everything
down because
multiplies.
Yeah,
they
so you don't
care.
want to. What they're going to put down the sink, when I train, we call it fog: fats, oils, and grease. Mayonnaise, salad dressing, vinaigrettes,
Bacon grease.
bacon grease.
Yeah.
If you have a crock pot and you don't want to pour the half inch of, it's just a half an inch of liquid. Well, the liquids have they eventually become solids when they congeal. You don't want to pour that down your sink. If you don't eat your mashed potatoes, I will say, when you're at the dinner table and you've got a plate in front of you and you're done eating and you didn't eat all the mashed potatoes and the gravy, take your napkin, wipe your kisser, go to the trash can, scrape off the bones, because we're smart enough to not put the bones down the sink. We're smart enough to do that. But then we rinse everything into the sink. Take your napkin, wipe your plate, and be kind to your septic or your sewer line.
Yes.
Yeah.
Don't put that down there, because mashed potatoes have butter in them, if you have really good mashed potatoes.
Oh, yeah.
And then gravy has oil in it. So fog, fats, oils, and grease. Don't put stuff down the sink. You're just doing yourself a disfavor.
And you got to think, the people inside those multiplexes, there's all different nationalities. And some put everything down the drain, some know not to. So it's really something to look at.
Absolutely. So we talked about pre-inspection from the buyer's perspective, but increasingly in a lot of markets, especially up north in King County, sellers are increasingly just doing the work themselves. There are a lot of seller-provided pre-listing inspection reports, and that's just normal behavior when you buy a house in Seattle, for example. Less so down here, but it may be trending more in that direction. So again, same question. What have you seen that works in that respect, and what are some of the legal potential risks and consequences that sellers should be aware of either way? And we'll start with Michael.
Well, you're right. Seattle and Bellevue, you almost can't even find a house that's for sale that doesn't have a seller procured inspection. It's just normal. You're always going to have that. I guess I would say to a listing agent or a seller, if you have a seller procured inspection, don't tell buyers they can't inspect anyway. I mean, you're doing the seller procured inspection because you don't want 20 people inspecting, traipsing through your house. But the minute that you put the brakes on and say you can't inspect, you again increase your liability or potential liability for post-closing litigation. So, we love agents, but there's always a but.
Sure.
We've been trying to get agents to swallow that pill for a lot of years. Like, do an inspection ahead of time. We feel like we're doing it backwards. Like, for all these 23 years, I feel like we've been doing it backwards. We should inspect before. But they don't want to do that because anything we can find out, we have to disclose.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, I get that. I totally get that. But if you disclose it, just disclose what fix what you're going to fix, and now you have some time. You're not under crunch time. You're not in contract. It's hard to get people out to your house anyway. You might have a few more weeks to get competitive bids.
With the shortage of contractors,
someone
it's very hard,
to repair it. So have them come out, do the repairs, and let's say you find 12 things, and you're only going to repair 10 of them, but 2 of them you're not. Just disclose it. If you disclose it, then the buyer can't come back and say, well, you didn't replace that, leaky faucet washer. Well, yeah, but, and I'm using that as a puny example, if it's something bigger and you didn't have the money to do it, you disclose it, they can't complain about it because you disclose it. You should have made your offer accordingly.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So, that's what I would say.
Sure. Dwayne, what do you think?
I think it's a great tool. It's kind of like the analogy if you used before with cars. I do the same thing when I teach classes. So if you go out to a mechanic, you buy a used car, he labels this, this, and this. Well, you have the option of repairing those tires, getting a new battery or not. So it gives them the education. The biggest thing about what we do is we're consultants and educators. Mm-hmm. So we're educating that buyer what he can and cannot do. He's going to know his comfortable zone, he's going to know not his zone, and know if he wants to move forward or not. So it's a great tool to use, but you've got to look at it definitely as education.
Wonderful. Well, we're about to wrap up, but before we do, any final parting words of wisdom, starting with Michael, then Wayne?
Okay.
Well, I would say on that seller procured inspection, we get some buyer or some agents who can't get the seller to pay for it. I think it's an easier thing that, the NAR, National Association of Realtors, your association, that you paid dues for,
Yes.
they did a study a number of years ago, and they found out that houses that are pre-inspected prior to listing sell faster and for higher than asking, at asking or higher. Now, we don't have that problem now.
No, we don't.
But even your own association agrees with that whole thought pattern of inspect before you sell. It just makes things easier. Every time I go and do an inspection for a buyer where they had a seller procured inspection, there's just less for me to find. It's just an easier inspection. I mean, I don't mind hard inspections. I've done some pretty hard inspections, but I think it's really beneficial. There's a few exceptions where you might not want to do one, and I understand that not wanting to disclose, but you know, we're happy to. And I do have some agents who pay for the inspection for their sellers. Now, I'm not saying you have to do that, but some business models, they're starting to lean that direction as part of their marketing package. So
Interesting. Dwayne, any wisdom?
I guess I would add to what you've already done is you want to make sure that that inspection is done by someone that's been in the game a long time, someone that stays on top of the codes, the education. I would be leery of, oh, who's that company? I never heard of them before. I would be leery of buying a house by someone that's not reputable, been around a long time. But in our field, same as agents, there's a lot of really good inspectors, and then there's guys that just kind of fly. So you want to make sure it's a good, reputable company. I know in my area and coming out here, if they see my report or one of Michael's, like, okay, these guys have been around, they know what they're doing, they're comfortable. And that's what I would recommend is, if you're the seller, don't just grab the cheapest guy out there. Grab someone who knows what they're doing, has been around a while.
yeah, that can be kind of problematic, and Dwayne's exactly right. You want a more seasoned inspection company because, and the biggest issue that a lot of agents had, well, what if Inspector A inspects for a pre-listing inspection, and then the buyer gets their own inspection, he finds stuff that the first guy did. Well, maybe it's time to hire a more seasoned company so that doesn't happen.
Yep.
You know, we're always looking for the broken bones and the cancer, not the pimples. And you know, one inspector might find a few pimples that the other guy doesn't, but we're all going to find the same broken bones and the cancer.
Pimples won't cost you, cancer will cost you.
Yeah,
Sure. All right, well, with that, we are out of time, but thank you so much for your expertise. This was super informative.
My pleasure.
Dwayne, of course, Dwayne Boggs from Boggs Inspection Service and Michael Wickland from Sterling Inspection Group. Quality home inspectors. For years, I've been sending buyers and sellers their way. I definitely recommend them. Again, this is Anders Ibsen from Windermere Professional Partners, managing broker for Anders Ibsen Homes. Thank you so much for watching. Keep the questions coming. Have a great day.
Thank you.